Howdy ho guys, and welcome to the Bojanian vlog. How you guys all doing? Hope you're doing well. A bit of a late night vlog entry for me tonight, but I wanted to get a vlog out, and yeah, and that's why I'm here, right? But anyway, today's entry I wanted to kind of share my most recent realization, if you will. And the kind of subject of this vlog entry is going to be somewhat controversial, as if like most of the stuff I talk about isn't, controversial enough already, right? But like, we get into the whole personal development thing, or the spiritual thing, because we have problems that we identify in life. And we get into these fields because they hold the promise of resolution for us, right? And of course, my words potentially carry, that feeling of judgment with them, right? But I don't necessarily intend that to be the case, right? And rather, I want to present this entry through, the lens of my own experience, because usually, or rather I can and tend to have like a very preachy tone in these videos, because when I have these realizations, I tend to be like quite passionate about them, as anyone who has the ability to download this kind of thing, like, when you have these insights drop into your consciousness, like you're just so passionate about them, right? So you end up sounding quite preachy in the way that you present them. But like, I know how sensitive this topic that I'm about to talk about is, and as such I don't want to come off in a preachy way, because essentially this is the source of a lot of people's resistance. This is something that, if I kind of say too bluntly, I feel that, it's going to trigger whoever's watching this. But either way, I'll try my best, just to provide it from my own perspective. And I hope this will reach you well, because I was kind of debating whether or not to do this entry, because honestly I feel that it is my most latest insight, and so like I feel the need to share it. I feel it will be helpful as kind of a landmark, not only for myself but for the people who might be watching this. But either way, I ultimately decided to share it, right? And so in this entry I kind of want to talk about my latest experience, which involved my ego essentially being utterly destroyed, right? And even then, like, I don't think it's as violent necessarily as it sounds, but like, of course this entry is going to be entitled Egoic Meltdown. That's the subject of this entry, right? And again, I was saying how we all kind of go on this journey in order to find answers for ourselves, in order to find resolution for ourselves, right? And along this journey, we adopt many different paradigms, let's just say. We adopt many different modalities that either are given to us by, teachers, mentors, or indeed ones that we have come up for ourselves, like when we learn how to download, for the spiritual people out there, that's our language, that's our articulation of it, is like when we start to formulate our own paradigms and become autonomous in the way that we approach personal development, essentially, that's putting it in more practical terms. We are nonetheless trying to fix sides of ourselves, right? Because honestly, that's the only way that we know how to approach the problems in our lives, right? But try as we might, there will always be those areas in our lives that we can't quite seem to correct, and we go from technique to technique, spiritual practice to spiritual practice, idea to idea, and we explore all of these different perspectives, and we come to find, or rather, what happened to me lately was, I don't know why it happened now, but like I said, what happened was that I experienced when your ego completely breaks down, right? And again, it's weird because one thing you will discover, or rather one thing that I discovered as this happened to me, was that there's this irony to life, it's like when you are struggling with your problems and you see no way out, that is when you are the most desperate for a solution, right? Like when we start off and we're so cognizant of all of these problems that we have, that's when we're the most desperate for, a solution. But then once something breaks within you and you realize that, like, all along you were the one who were holding yourself back in life, essentially. That's the kind of realization I had. That need for an answer, it kind of goes away, and that's the irony of life, right? But like, essentially what happened for me was, like, I have this problem, of coexisting with people. That's one of my problems, right, that I've always struggled with. I have another problem where I have a fear of success, I have a fear of putting my authentic intentions out into the world and to connect with the world in an authentic way. I did an entry about how I've always worn a mask in front of people, right? And it's great having that awareness, but like, even at that time, like, I was still kind of at the mercy of that problem that I had, right? And I don't know why it happened now, but something within me broke. I've been trying to force myself to find, to change my behavior so that I incorporated other people, but like, that never got rid of that fear I had of, like, being authentic with people, and I don't know what it is, like, like, I just got to a point, like, what triggered it was, like, I was watching, random videos on YouTube. I recently joined this academy that's made by YouTube creators, like, that's about making your own YouTube videos, right, and how to succeed as a YouTuber. And I watched some of those videos, right, and then, like, all of these different sources I watched, right, and I don't know what happened, but, like, it's the usual thing where, like, it's like you start to feel worthless because you're like, I'm not doing the things that these people are saying is the right thing to do. You know, I am, you know, like, I feel like I have to force myself to see things their way with no kind of, you know, consideration of how I feel. You know, I feel trapped in the sense that, like, I give power to what they say, obviously, because they're authority, you know, but at the same time, I can't reconcile my own feelings of that, right? And then, I don't know why, or, you know, what exactly, but something just within me just broke, right? And that I found an articulation for, which is when your ego essentially breaks, right? Because, honestly, what I have come to understand is that, like, we're all in this because we're trying to find a way out, and that is a very egoic thing to do. That is a position that has been established by the ego, right? And as I explained in my entry that goes into what is the ego versus what is the shadow, you know, it is rooted in the subconscious belief that lies within the shadow, that we do not deserve what we desire, right? And the ego basically tries to fight and to manipulate and to control the external world to try and prove to itself, essentially, that the fear that it feels, the disconnection that it feels, the subconscious belief that one holds, that one is not deserving of what one truly wants out of life, you know, that is why the ego exists, essentially. The ego exists because of fear and a sense of being threatened, right? But after the ego, like, just tries and tries and tries to manipulate the external environment, to like keep doing all of these things that promise, you know, you do this and, like, this is the right thing to do, right? And you go down that rabbit hole and you keep doing the things that, like, you think are going to help make you happy. And then suddenly you hit a point. I don't know, like, again, like, it's so strange because, like, I don't know why it happened right now. And, like, I think my guess would be, like, this is the same for anyone else who has experienced this thing that I've experienced, right? When your ego just suffers a meltdown. And you just admit to yourself, okay, you know what? I have a problem being intimate with other people. I have a problem, like, actually putting myself out there. And instead of doing things that don't actually help me, you know, in any way. Yes, I'm making more videos. Yes, I'm, you know, doing this and that to improve the little kind of details of my life. But, like, am I really going towards the things that I really need to go towards? You know? And the answer was no. And something within me broke, right? It broke, and for the first time in my life, I felt a breath of fresh air, because, like, there was nothing else to fight for. You know? All of the energy, the spirit that I had to put into this stupid fight that the ego puts up, right, just vanished. I ran out of juice, man. You know? And it was at that point that I finally realized that, like, I have no ego. Or rather, it was the first evidence that the ego is not as solid as it tries to make out. You know, your identity, with all of your understandings of, like, what your problems are, what your strengths are, what your, like, unique selling points are, when that collapses, because you've tried so hard all your life to keep that front up, that identity up, so that you can feel secure, essentially, right? that structure, once it collapses, that is the first instance that you have that bestows you the understanding that ego is not everything, right? Your identity is not everything, you know. Who cares if I am untalented? Who cares if, you know, like, I go out to meet a bunch of people. My typical ego fears are, I'm uninteresting. I'm generally like not very knowledgeable about things. You know, I'm a bit of a weirdo and an outcast, an outlier. People aren't going to get along with me. You know, my tastes are too unique. My interests are too unique. The bottom line is, if I go out and meet people, there is nothing there for me. That was the belief, right? But then once I had this experience where, like, you know, like, I just ran out of fuel. I don't know how else to explain it, you know, like, egoic meltdown was what it was. Like, my ego just broke. It wasn't a choice. You know, this is from my own experience, right? It wasn't out of choice that I suddenly, like, realized that the ego is not as solid as it makes out to be. It was rather through, like, me just, like, trying to protect the ego by saying, like, oh yeah, it's because I don't have enough content. It's because I don't have a big enough portfolio. It's because I'm not well read enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not funny enough. I'm not entertaining enough. All of these rationalizations that the ego gave to me, like, I have done them, and then I reached a point where, like, I just ran out of fuel. I just couldn't do it anymore. And it was at that point where I had no choice, basically. Again, like, when we are in that egoic chase, you know, when we are desperate to succeed, we are desperate to overcome our problems, because we subconsciously believe that those problems are bigger than us, that we have no way of approaching the resolution of these problems. Because that's what it is, you know, when we are desperate to solve these problems, when we are so fixated on these problems being present within us, that is because there is a subconscious belief that these problems are unsolvable. That's why we're so desperate to solve them, right? That's what I realized, right? And then, like, when I finally ran out of fuel, out of gas, out of juice, and I just couldn't hold it up anymore, I realized, you know what? Who cares? Maybe, like, I spent all of this time giving a fuck. And like, when I just couldn't give a fuck anymore, that's when I stopped giving a fuck, you know? And, like, now I feel as though I can, like, go out and meet people, and there's nothing to hide anymore. What is there to hide anymore about myself? That, like, I'm actually untalented or unmotivated, or I'm a late bloomer, or all of this fear that I have? Who cares, man? Someone asks me, I'll admit to them, yeah, I don't think I'm very talented. I don't think I'm very professional. I don't think, like, I'm very friendly or give a shit about most other people. Does that make me a bad person? Probably. You probably wouldn't want to hang out with me. But you know what? The first step is to admit that. I don't know what this is going to lead to. I don't know if admitting this to anyone would result in, whether they would actually feel sorry for me, or whether they'd suddenly be transformed by this authenticity that I'm providing to them. That's the idea. But I don't know. All I know is that, like, I can't, like, I have no more energy to hide anymore. You know, like, I have no choice but to take that step anymore because the ego is dead. Or rather, like, the ego is always there, but like I've experienced egoic death. And this is what I wanted to express in this entry. I was a bit more personal than I planned to be, but that's because like I didn't want to preach this to you. You know, I probably still sound a bit preachy, but like I wanted to at least give my first-hand experience to you and be authentic. Because what? So I'm just going to tell you that like, yeah, egoic meltdown is the key to like ridding yourself of problems. It is the organic way of approaching personal development and self-help and all of that stuff. Self-improvement. You know, your ego is the problem. When are you going to realize that your ego needs to commit suicide before you can fucking move on? It's like, what does that even mean? If I was someone in this position listening to this video of myself, right, I would be triggered as fuck. This guy is telling me that like, you know, like nothing you do is going to help until you reach a point somewhere in the future where like basically your ego commits suicide. And that is the point you start to heal, right? So that's why I wanted to provide this in a first person perspective, basically. So I hope this message was, I hope, you know, the core of my message reached you, right? If you didn't find this video very helpful, then like you're free to feel that, and like I won't take offense at all. You know, just stop watching this video. I'm sure there's like other videos that would probably be more helpful for you, but like I feel that this was my latest insight, and it is a very important one for me, actually, because like I hit that point that I'm sure many spiritual leaders have talked about, other people who have gone through this process understand, which is that like you will reach a point in your journey, because everyone starts off like a victim of the ego and the shadow, right? This complex entity, you know, that exists within us because of the way that we were socialized as children and all throughout our lives, right? This undoing of that process will lead you down a very dark road where you keep trying and trying to force yourself to change and to manipulate and to make excuses, right? And it will be painful, but like you will reach a point, if you like, you will, you know, that maybe that's the silver lining of this. Is like, no matter what you think, like, i.e. it's not a result of your conscious involvement. It just happens at some point in life, in time, right? You will reach a point where your ego just shatters. And you just give up. You know, and like, it sounds so gruesome, but like once you go through that, all of the problems you thought were like titanic, they don't seem like such a big deal anymore. You know, take my example, right? You know, like I'm afraid of people, basically. I'm afraid of like talking to people because I'm afraid of them taking advantage of me. I'm afraid of like them rejecting me. I just don't know how to deal with people on a deep level. I can do the whole like small talk entertaining thing, but I have a fear of like getting intimate with people and like actually asking people for help and forming like closer relationships, even like if they're business relationships, right? But if I now approach this with my ego like basically ripped open, and I say to someone like, this is how I actually feel. I feel inadequate. I am scared. But I honestly need help. But at the same time, I have an expectation of what I have a clear idea of what I want, you know. And at the very least, if nothing else can be reached, I want to talk about it for the first time in my life. I don't want to hide it or make assumptions or end relation or like communicate in like an imperfect way. Because isn't that all we do? Isn't that what we do in society? We talk and our communication is imperfect, right? We don't fully communicate what it is that we desire or how we truly feel, and we just leave it at that. And so we have all of these relationships that are based on like people guessing what everyone else wants and assuming what everyone else wants. when no one knows what we each other want. And like, I for one am tired of that. I have no more energy for that. If anything, I just want to just be open now. I was afraid of being completely open and completely authentic because I thought that like privacy meant a degree of safety and security. But like, now I realize that like, what's the point in that if you're never going to truly hit what you want out of life? Why not just say what you really want? You know, if like you get into the typical situation where you're talking to someone and you feel like you don't want to talk to them because like you already assume that that person doesn't want to hear what you want to say, doesn't care about what you truly feel, that you can never reach a resolution, so you don't bother talking to that person and communicating with them. What's that going to lead you? Where has it led you in your life, right? So I, for one, like after going through this egoic meltdown, right, I just want to be open with people now and let them know what I truly want, how I truly feel, and then be open to what they truly want and what they truly feel. Because like, I am tired of like playing these games. I just want everyone to be honest about what they want, and then we can help each other get what we want, you know. So cool, I'm not going to drag this entry on much longer. I hope this entry was helpful, you know, like, this is basically the next step for me anyway, on my spiritual journey. And I hope, you know, you could extract some value from this. Egoic meltdown is the point, or in my experience, this is what I've experienced recently, where like the ego just like, it just breaks. And you're left like, just like, I just want to be myself, honestly. I'm tired of not being myself and making more excuses why it's not a good idea to be myself yet. You know, and once you cross that bridge, there's no going back, I guess. It's pretty much a Pandora's box. But alongside all of the fear, it's also the first time in my life that I have been able to breathe properly. Or like, rather, I know what real breaths taste like now. You know, anyway. So yeah, I may talk more about this, but like, honestly, I still feel that like, this is quite a sensitive topic, you know, because this is like what most people are resisting, you know. But like, either way, this is kind of my message now, you know. Let's just be honest. I tell you what I want and feel. You tell me what you want and feel. And if we're not compatible, and if we arrive at conflict, even if we get a bit heated, at least we have that channel where we can be like, okay, you know, even though we're not right for each other, at least we know what we actually want, and we can help each other just move on to actually obtaining the things we actually do want. And that's scary, and it seems like such a foreign concept before you hit this point. It sounds nice, but then you're kind of inundated by the subconscious belief that it was never going to happen. Isn't that weird? You think, like, most of us subconsciously believe that like authenticity is impossible, even though we consciously like the idea. But anyway, yeah, those are my musings for today. I'm going to make another entry after this, so look forward to that. This is an exciting time for me. Like, I feel like something's about to tip, you know. Whether that's good or bad, at least something is tipping, right? That's how I feel. So cool. Hope you guys are having a great day or evening or whatever, and I'll catch you guys in the next entry. Peace out.